Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into episode 7 here of the Fourth String Sports Podcast. I'm Brady. Got my co host Mitch here with me. So happy to be back with you guys. We're going to shake it up a little bit today. We've been going through each NFL team, rating their offseason, going through their pickups, their losses, their draft picks, and what we think they're going to do next season. We're still going to get to that. We've got to take care of the Carolina Panthers today. We are definitely going to take care of that. But before we do that, there's been some interesting developments in regards to the continuation of the NBA season. Now, we're going to talk about that in the next couple of episodes. We're going to talk about, in conjunction with still going through the NFL teams, we're going to talk about, how college football is looking like they're going to handle it, how pro baseball is looking like they're going to handle it, what we think everything is going to be. But the NBA has definitely taken the most steps, at least the most public steps, of what the next couple of steps are going to be here with finishing their season. Now, Mitch is going to kind of break down the formats for you. It looks like the one that's the predominant theory is a World Cup style. I'm not too much of a fan of that style. I think both that style as well as just like a conventional tournament has pros and cons to it. And we'll get into it a little bit. We're going to break down kind of what the playoffs would look like. Any big break like this benefits certain teams a lot more than it does others. We'll talk. The thing that I've kept hearing floating around is, could Kevin Durant come back for the playoffs here? Which would be a huge boost to the Nets, who are, fighting for that playoff position, as well as make it really difficult for the East, or whatever group ends up, playing the Nets. So it is going to be interesting. So we're going to break that down, and then we're going to get into Carolina and their season, a really interesting team with a really interesting offseason. We do appreciate everybody who's listened. We appreciate everybody who's liked the videos and responded to us. Remember, you guys, go back, listen to all the videos. We've so far covered 1/8 of the NFL. We've gone through Atlanta, Arizona, Baltimore, and Buffalo. Go back, listen to those episodes. Let us know what you think. We're always willing to go back and review them. You can email us at fourthstringsp@gmail.com. Again, that's fourth, FOURTH, string SP@gmail.com. So Mitch, why don't you break down kind of what this World Cup looking playoff might be?
Yeah, so Bleacher Report reported earlier this week that the NBA is considering a World Cup style format for how they're going to begin their season. So basically, they're going to take the best 20 teams who have the best records and then split them up into tiers and then create evenly matched pools for how they do it in the World Cup, obviously. So, there'll be a Group A, a Group B, a Group C, a Group D, and so on and so forth. And then you'll kind of have a tourney style to weed out who advances or not. And then whoever advances through that World Cup kind of style will then go into the normal playoffs that we see, a standard, best of 7 series.
Yeah, that's interesting. This has been obviously this whole thing with the virus and in terms of sports has been a super fluid situation. I remember like when the first thoughts came out and it was, well, who's ever just in right now, we're just going to end the regular season and the playoffs are what they're at, and obviously that doesn't sit well with a lot of the teams battling for playoff position, whether that's the teams battling to get into the playoffs or the teams possibly battling to, instead of being a 6 seed and having to go on the road for a playoff series, getting to host a playoff series, and all that stuff. Obviously, as Bucks fans, it doesn't really affect the Bucks. Like, they're a little bit too far out at number 1 for anybody to really affect their positioning. But it changes who they could play, and that's huge. This World Cup style, I personally, I don't like. I don't like the idea of splitting teams up that way. The one big issue that I have with it is that, A, I don't think it's fair to the highly superior teams, and B, I think it's too much of a give to a lot of the lower tier teams. Over half of the NBA is going to get into the playoffs no matter what, right? 16 of the 30 teams get in the playoffs. But to put 20 of them in a round robin style tournament, to me, it's just a little bit ridiculous. So, like, if we break down the standings, and you were to go with, let's just take the East, right? Now, obviously, it's not going to be 10 from the East, 10 from the West. It's going to go off of record. But the East is pretty much set in terms of who's going to make the playoffs right now. The Orlando Magic are looking at the 8th seed, and they're about 5.5 games ahead of Washington with, if we even finish this season, about 17 games left. So Washington would have to win at least 12 games and hope that Orlando loses a bunch of them in order to get to the playoffs. And Charlotte behind them is a game and a half behind Washington. And then you go to the West, and obviously it's a lot closer. I mean, Memphis at the 8th seed, and then 3.5 games back from them are Portland, New Orleans, and Sacramento. So all of them are fighting, and then a half game behind them is San Antonio, and 2 games behind them are Phoenix. So there's 6 teams fighting for that 8th seed, all within 6 games of each other. But I don't know. It's just the group style, World Cup. It just doesn't sit well with me. I don't like it. I would rather them just do a tournament with seeds 7 through 12, and the best 2 teams get in the playoffs for each conference. Whoever wins gets in the playoffs from those conferences. That's what I would prefer. I think it allows the lesser teams to kind of get hot going into the playoffs, which can make playoff games interesting. And it gives the teams who legitimately have a shot still have a shot,
Yeah, with the whole World Cup thing, I mean, it's okay. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. I mean, right now it's only being kicked around as an idea. I really don't think it's going to get enough steam to actually be put in place. I totally agree with you. I would rather have, a 7 through 12 kind of tournament to decide the last 2 seeds. But I'm also a fan of the other big idea that's really gaining some steam, especially in the media, of how the NBA playoffs could look.
Yeah, well, in what way is that?
So the other big idea for how the playoffs would go, I think a lot of fans might have already heard, is doing a playoff series of 1 through 6 overall kind of seeding. And it's already kind of came out to how it would look if it started today. So 1 through 6. So the number 1 seed would play the 16th seed, and it would be the Bucks versus the Magic.
Oh, 1 through 16th. Okay, I thought you were saying 1 through 6th.
No. And then seed 8 and 9 would be the Heat versus the Thunder. 5 against 12, the Celtics and the Sixers. 4 through against 13, the Clippers versus the Mavs. 2 against 15, Lakers against Nets. 7 against 10, Jazz versus Rockets. 3 against 14, Raptors versus Grizzlies. And then 6 against 11, the Nuggets versus the Pacers.
Yeah, with that, I would prefer that. And I think that, you get that really interesting, cross-conference playoff matchups. Like, the idea of the Heat and the Thunder playing each other in a playoff series that's not the NBA Finals is so interesting to me. The idea of seeing, Goran Dragic going up against Chris Paul is so good, is so interesting to me, as well as just some of those other matchups, across the board. Pacers Nuggets, I think, is an awesome series on paper. Like, to see them go best of 7, to see Nikola Jokic go up against Victor Oladipo, and watching those teams go back and forth, I think that's awesome. And then obviously we can talk about Nets Lakers, right? Kyrie probably isn't coming back from the shoulder surgery, but hey, if KD comes back and you're talking about KD and the Nets taking on LeBron and the Lakers in the playoffs, God, that's awesome. This seeding to me makes way more sense. And this is where, for all the teams battling for playoff position, this is where I would go, okay, you take realistically, it's the 6 teams from the 6 teams from the West there that we talked about, like Portland and Sacramento and stuff like that. And you have them battle it out. You have them battle it out with the 7 and the 8 seed from the East and the West, and the top 4 teams who end up with the best record, or who end up, in you just have them do round robin that way. that is so I would much prefer that. And there's NBA players who would prefer that as well. Like Dame Lillard with Portland. Right now, Portland wouldn't make the playoffs if we just went to the playoff format. They would be outside the 8th seed. So he wants that round robin tournament. Like he wants Portland to have the chance to make the playoffs. And we saw what they did in the playoffs last year. Like they made it to the conference finals. They took down the Thunder. They took down the Nuggets. And they made it to the conference finals. Now, granted, they got swept, but that's not necessarily all on Lillard. I think he played that series with some broken ribs and stuff. He wasn't completely healthy, but that's the format I would prefer, and I hope that that's the format that we end up getting for the NBA series.
Yeah, and I got four thoughts on everything you just said. I think this is going to be the playoff style that's ultimately we're going to see for one big reason. I think economically and ratings wise, the possibility of having a finals at the Staples Center throughout the entire final series, Clippers versus Lakers,
Yeah.
I think is a very appealing to the league and the sponsors and, everybody. So I think that's why this is going to pan out the way it is. And then two interesting thoughts from looking at this projected tournament so far. It looks like the Bucks probably have the easiest path to at least getting to the quote-unquote conference finals. I mean, they have to play the Magic, and then they'll most likely beat them, and then they're most likely going to be playing the Heat. And then if they beat the Heat, then this is where it gets tough. They play the Clippers, and if they beat the Clippers, then they have to most likely play the Lakers in the finals.
You're exactly right. But at the same time, you look at it and you go, okay, the Clippers would have to play the Mavericks first, and the Mavericks are not a slouch team. And then if they win that, they either got to play the Sixers or they got to play the Celtics. And that's, to me, the idea of Kawhi Leonard playing the Sixers again in a playoff series after the semifinal round we got last year is awesome. Is so cool to think about. And then the idea of and you hit it right on the head. The idea of a Los Angeles versus Los Angeles NBA Finals would be astounding, And this is where I almost think that if this works out well, this could be the way the NBA goes permanently. Because realistically, there's no benefit to conferences in the NBA. Kind of the same way that there's not a huge benefit to conferences in the NFL. Because there's no real distinction to them. You don't get a bonus for being in the AFC or the NFC or being in the East or the West. I would prefer that it's literally the best 16 teams make the playoffs. So then that way the games where, the Clippers play the Pacers mean a lot more because then every game is battling for playoff position, or when the Magic play the Trailblazers or, anything like that. This is the style I prefer to see. I think this is the style that would give us the best basketball and the best storylines, the idea of James Harden and the Rockets playing Kevin Durant and the Nets in the playoffs. Obviously a lot would have to happen for that to be the case. But the idea of a Harden versus Durant playoff series is one of the coolest things I can think of. There's so many storylines in this setup that the NBA would make bank, especially right now with no sports happening.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I know we talk about the potential of Kevin Durant returning to the Nets, but if we do the play-in style to determine those last two seeds for the 7th and 8th or whatever, what about a team like the Warriors getting Klay Thompson back healthy? Do you think they could make kind of a playoff run with the healthy Klay Thompson and Curry's back and Draymond's been playing all season? I think that would be another interesting team to look at if we do a play-in series like that. And then when you look on the flip side of the Bucks kind of having the easiest, then you look at the Lakers. It's pretty tough. I mean, you've said it before. They have to play a Nets team who is kind of underrated, and if they get Kevin Durant back, that's even tougher.
I think even without Kevin Durant, they're an underrated basketball team.
Yeah, exactly. And then say the Lakers beat the Nets, then they have to play the winner of the Jazz and the Rockets, and that's not going to be a sweep. Yeah. And then if they beat them, then they're most likely going to play the Raptors in the quote-unquote conference finals. and then if they beat them, then they have to beat the Bucks or the Clippers in the finals. It's just gonna be, wear and tear on them.
But at the same time, also think about like what if they do it? Like what if they make the run? You know, like it's been a long time since we've seen an NBA team, like a really unlikely NBA team, make a run. Um, obviously, like the Raptors weren't expected to do as well as they were, but they had Kawhi Leonard last year. But like, you don't in the NBA, you don't get the sixth seed who wins the finals like you do in the NFL. Like you don't get the lower team who goes super far. And in order to relate to baseball, I'm gonna relate to like the Brewers did a couple years ago, where they took the Dodgers to 7 in the in the semis there, or in
Yeah.
the championship. So you don't get that in the NBA. So the thought of like, man, if Kevin Durant could come back and take the Nets, even if the Nets win, even if the Nets take the Lakers to 7, right? Or even if they pull out 2 games against them and take the series to 6, that is immediately a win for the NBA. Like the way you market that, tune in because you can only see it since they're only playing in Orlando, so you can only see it on TV. Let's watch Kevin Durant and the Nets play LeBron James and Anthony Davis and the Lakers. Let's watch James Harden and the Rockets play Mike Conley and the Jazz here, and Donovan Mitchell. Let's see, like it's so cool. To go to your first point about the Warriors, mathematically the Warriors are the only team technically eliminated from the playoffs right now. So how cool would it be if like Klay Thompson came back and the Splash Brothers reemerged the way that they did? But the kind of the issue with that is that like in order to do that, you would have to take seeds 7 through 15, and all of them would have to play in the round robin. And I don't know if it's fair to have a team that's mathematically eliminated like the Warriors, or even like some teams that should be mathematically eliminated like the Pistons and the Hawks and the Cavaliers, and put them in that tournament. Like I get it, but I also feel like it's super unfair to the teams that have beat them so thoroughly throughout the season.
Yeah, and I mean for that, like determining the last 2 seeds, I've heard from a couple sources that it would most likely be 7 through 15 who are playing in that kind of tournament to determine it. So, I don't know if like them being like mathematically eliminated already, if it would get kind of revoked, and then they would still have a chance to play for a playoff series given the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that's going to work out, but I mean, it would definitely be interesting to see if, them getting a healthy Klay Thompson, what kind of playoff run they could make, especially with everybody kind of writing them off, including myself.
Yeah.
After how last season unfolded.
Well, last season, and I mean the Klay Thompson injury, the Steph Curry injury for how long he was out. D'Angelo Russell was there, and then they traded him, and then Andrew Wiggins is there now. Fully healthy, a lineup of Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry is terrifying to me, and I think it's terrifying to any team. If it does go 7 through 15, I think it just makes for better basketball. I'm still sticking to what I said about it would be rather unfair. And the reason it would be rather unfair is that you're going to then make like the Grizzlies play a fully healthy Warriors team when the Warriors shouldn't have really been in the playoffs at all, So like, obviously it's not the Warriors' fault that Steph Curry got hurt, but it shouldn't be the burden of the NBA to shoehorn teams who don't deserve to be in the playoffs into the playoffs, Although, again, we got to think of the storyline here, because the Warriors have only won 15 games this season. In this playoff format, where they would have to fight to get into the playoffs and then fight in the playoffs, if they win the finals, they'd have to win roughly 30 games. So they'd have to win like 2 times as many games as they've won the whole season. And it's like, just imagine if they did it, It's like, just think about the thing that makes it so interesting to me and so exciting is just think about the possibilities of it, the possibilities of the Warriors taking on the Lakers in the playoffs. Like, we didn't get to see that last year, and we really wanted to see that. Like, it's so cool to me. So I understand both sides of it. But this playoff format, I prefer this 1 through 16 a lot more than I do like a group of 5 round robin World Cup type setup.
Yeah, and I definitely think the way this playoff is set up, I think it takes away that narrative that like whoever wins the finals this year should have an asterisk next to their name just because of how the season unfolded. I mean, we talked about it. Like, if the Lakers make the run that they do, beating the Nets, beating the winner of the Jazz Rockets, beating the Raptors, and then beating the Clippers and Bucks, how can you not say that they didn't earn it? Or if a team like we just talked about, the Warriors, who won like 15 games and they somehow get in as a playoff seed and then make a run. I mean, how could you not say that they're deserving of the championship?
Yeah, like how could you not say that that's an utter success,
Exactly.
Now, obviously this setup is going to be interesting because as of right now, it's going to be happening in Orlando, Florida. All of it is. So there's not really going to be like home court advantage.
Hmm.
Hopefully, as things open up and hopefully they do it in a safe manner. Hopefully, as things open up, we're going to get the possibility of like Bucks basketball coming back to Milwaukee. But the issue is that you get some states like California where, if we're talking NBA teams, there's 4 in California, I think, if I remember right.
Lakers,
Clippers,
Clippers,
Lakers,
Kings.
Warriors, and Kings. Yeah.
Yep.
So all of them, California may not open till 2021. So how are we going to play pro basketball in California? Now if it were to happen and we could get an all Staples Centers final, that'd be so cool. But even then, like the idea of this matchup, watching this on TV, is so interesting, I would beg that with how deprived of sports we are, that the NBA Finals this year, if televised, may break a lot of records for most tuned-in event, just for the sake of watching it. Like Super Bowl level tune-ins and stuff. Because, man, all of the potential matchups are so interesting to look at. So, I mean, all those matchups are just so interesting to look at. They're so interesting to think about. There's so many storylines there, like, you know, and there's so many contracts that are dependent on it as well. Like the whole narrative right now is that Giannis may leave Milwaukee if they don't go to the finals. Well, that's kind of thrown out of the window because who knows what the playoff picture is even going to look like. Like if it's just East West, Milwaukee has a cakewalk to the finals. If you now throw it in where they may have to play the Clippers, man, that gets super difficult to think about.
Yeah, and just one thought about the whole Giannis like leaving thing. I think it's BS. I mean, they've been saying that for years now, and everyone's saying, "Oh, he's definitely going to leave, and he's going to go play with the Warriors and whatever." I mean, everybody in the media and fans just want to see the Warriors have a super team again, and they're only saying this because Giannis is playing in a small market. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if he was in the exact same situation the Bucks are with a different team that had a bigger brand name, say one of the LA teams or the Celtics or
Or if the Bucks
somebody,
were in Chicago.
yeah, or something like that, would we be saying this every year? Like, oh, Giannis is gonna leave. Oh, if he doesn't win a finals, he's definitely leaving. He's gonna go
Yeah.
join another team and form super. No, it's stupid. How many times do you have to say that he loves here? That he loves it here. He loves the city. He loves the people. I mean, shoot, he found his girlfriend and the mother of his son here.
You
So
know, but here's my counterpoint to that is that nobody thought LeBron was going to leave Cleveland. You know, now obviously Giannis has a much better relationship with the front office than LeBron has ever had with either of the front offices in Cleveland he was with. Um, but to your point, like you say, okay, well Giannis, found his girlfriend and the mother of his kid here. But my point to follow that up is Giannis now has a kid. Like he now has responsibilities. So the issue with the Bucks is that in a small market, because the NBA doesn't have revenue sharing the way that the NFL does, small market teams are so incredibly penalized that Giannis may never win a championship in Milwaukee, you know? And if he wants to win a championship, he may have to leave. I hope he doesn't leave. I love Giannis. I love the growth he's shown. I love that Milwaukee is relevant for basketball again, you know? But there's a lot of there's a lot of maybes there. There's a lot of iffies. And with a supermax contract coming up, now granted, he still has a long time left on his current contract, but with a supermax contract coming up, man, that can really harm the Bucks in their ability to build a team around him in the future, and he'll be well aware of that. I don't think he's leaving anytime soon. I don't know if whatever trade the Warriors could give him would be something Milwaukee would bite on. Let's not forget that Milwaukee almost traded for Steph Curry, but the reason they didn't was because of a bum ankle, and they traded Andrew Bogut for Monte Ellis instead. So imagine where the Bucks franchise would look had they made the Steph Curry trade instead. So there's pros and cons. It's interesting to talk about. It's always going to be interesting to talk about. The Warriors have made it very well known that they want to go get Giannis. We just don't know what's in Giannis's head when it comes to it. Is he going to give Milwaukee the loyalty discount, or is he going to go chase a ring and maybe chase some money? And frankly, if he does that, I can't blame him for doing that. Like, as a person, I can't blame him. As a fan, yeah, I can be mad at him, but I can't blame him for wanting to go out to California to go try to win a championship.
Yeah, but I don't think he should be going to the Warriors. I mean, think about the long-term,
Okay, so let's say he goes to the Celtics instead, or he signs with the Sixers or the Raptors, right? I think any team he signs with, any of those larger market teams, I can't blame him for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, of course that makes sense. I mean, bigger market, he's going to get more sponsors and that kind of stuff, more money outside of his contract and stuff. But I mean, I don't know. I think it all depends on how the Milwaukee situation ends up. I mean, if the Bucks as an organization keeps doing stuff that's putting them in a place to go to the finals or the conference finals every year, I don't think he's going to leave. But if he sees stuff that he doesn't like, or he sees the Bucks are on a downtrend, obviously he's probably going to leave. So I think it all comes down to that over like a money issue or whatever.
Yeah, the other thing to remember is that the Bucks were the ones who drafted Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he won him a championship. And then in '74, he took him to another championship where they took the Celtics to best of seven. Because remember, the Bucks used to be in the Western Conference. For people who didn't know that, when they won their championship, they won it in the Western Conference. They won it in '71. And then after that championship year, he said, this isn't a team, this isn't an organization that can get me where I want to go. So he left and won, I think, 4 more championships out with the Lakers. So the Bucks have had this happen to them. Now, granted, that was 50 years ago. History doesn't repeat itself, but the themes of it are prevalent throughout, history as well as sports. So it is interesting. It's going to be interesting to see. But now that we've kind of hammered home on basketball, Mitch, you got any kind of closing thoughts here on the NBA before we move into Carolina?
I put out a pretty interesting tweet once it's the location of where the playoffs are going to be held in Disney World. I said that if it is true that it's going to be in Disney World, that Robin Lopez and Brooke Lopez are going to drop 60 every night.
I saw that. That's funny. That's so funny. I was flipping through the other day. It was whose birthday was it? It was Ersan Ilyasova's birthday with the Bucks. Mm-hmm. And I've always made it very known that Ersan Ilyasova is one of my favorite basketball players. I think fundamentally he does everything so well. He's not super flashy. He's not going to put up big numbers, but man, I think he's a really underrated player. And so I was flipping through, they did like a birthday thing for him. I was flipping through their feed and stuff. And the antics of the Lopez brothers are like my favorite thing to watch. Like them wrestling the mascots of various NBA. I think that's so funny. But yeah, it would be cool if it was at Disneyland and Brooke Lopez shows up in a Mickey Mouse hat to the playoffs.
Yeah, because if people didn't know, the Lopez are like huge Disney fans.
Oh, they're nerds.
Yeah, I mean, they have like a Dennis Rodman story for those people who saw The Last Dance with him going to Vegas. They had a similar situation where they left Stanford when they were playing there for basketball and went to Disneyland for like a couple days and like came back and like people didn't know where they went and stuff like that. And Robin Lopez has been tweeting about like that the Bucks have to stay in like the Polynesian suite if it happens down there, and that each team's mascot shouldn't come and they have to be like a Disney character for their mascots and stuff like that. And he was assigning them like I forget it, but like each team had like a Disney character as their mascot for the playoffs and stuff like that. So Yeah, if it's definitely in Disney World, I think they might play a little bit better than if it was somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah. Have that little kid advantage there.
Yeah.
It would be interesting. Just the idea of the NBA Finals at Disney World, man, that's so cool. The idea of just having sports back is so cool. And as I mentioned, you guys, in the next couple of episodes, we're gonna break down some proposals by some different sports. Like we'll break it down. And Mitch, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Iowa State had a really interesting proposal for bringing back their season. What it is like they still plan on playing home games. Iowa State Stadium seats 60,000. They were going to seat 30,000. They were going to cut it to half capacity, have special like entrances and stuff. And the way it was going to work out was like 22,000 fans were already going to be season ticket holders, so it was going to be those lifelong fans. And then it was going to be about 8,000 freelancing tickets. And so that would still follow rules and stuff. Now, remember, Iowa is not a state that's shut down at all. Like Iowa State open this whole time. So they have some different rules. But it was an interesting proposal, and we'll break it down in the next couple of episodes as we continue to break down NFL teams. But to end this segment here, obviously the NBA situation is fluid as we get updates. We'll let you know. I'm sure this will come up on the next couple of episodes for us. But yeah, let's break down the Carolina Panthers. What an interesting team to talk about. Like, obviously, I think every NFL team is interesting. I'm not going to say any of them are boring, but Carolina is really like this enigma wrapped inside a puzzle, covered by a crossword, inside of a Sudoku, inside like the butthole of a massive like Rubik's Cube, because I can't figure out what they're doing, and I don't know if they know what they're doing. Like, I don't know if this organization knows what's happening right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It looks like there's no long-term plan. It's basically like David Temper is waking up each and every day and coming in like, oh, I want to sign Matt Rule and Joe Brady as my coaches, and then he'll wake up the next day and say like, hey, let's get rid of Cam Newton, Greg Olson, Mario Edison, all these like old regime guys, and then the next day it's let's sign like Teddy Bridgewater and Robbie Anderson, those kind of guys. So it's
Yeah.
weird.
Like, to me, it almost feels like they're being run by like a kid who just learned how to play Madden. Like it feels like they're being run by a kid who just learned how to play Madden and just figured out that it's so much more interesting if you play it with a salary cap on, you know? Because like it's like the kid was like he only plays offense, and then he goes, "Oh man, my defense was really bad last year. I'm going to draft all defensive players." You know? And then he goes, "Oh, I don't like my coach anymore. So I'm just going to go pick up a semi-successful college football head coach and do whatever I want." Like I don't understand the direction, the thought process here. And maybe Carolina Panthers fans do, and if you do, let us know. But I can't wrap my head around Carolina right now. But let's break them down a little bit. So Carolina didn't exactly have the best season last year. They finished 5-11. They were, for the first half of the season, up in playoff contention here. They started the season with Cam Newton at quarterback. He started 2 games. He played 2 games. Newton didn't do super well. He went 50 of 89 for 572 yards and an interception. Kyle Allen played the majority of the season. He threw 17 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, and threw for 3,300 yards. He's now in Washington. And then
Because
Will
he couldn't beat
Grier.
the Packers.
Yeah, right. Couldn't beat the Packers. And Will Grier played in 2 games as well. He threw for 228 yards, 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So as a team, they threw for 17 touchdowns, 21 interceptions. They started the season out. Cam Newton starts out at quarterback. They lose to the LA Rams, and then they lose a Thursday night game to Tampa Bay. Then they come out. Kyle Allen takes over at quarterback, and Kyle Allen rattles off 4 straight wins, right? Beats Arizona, beats Houston, beats Jacksonville, beats Tampa Bay. They come out of the bye week. They get slaughtered by the San Francisco 49ers, 51-13. They turn around. They beat the Titans. So just there, in their 5 wins on the season, They beat two playoff teams. They beat the Texans and the Titans, you know? So, okay, pretty good record, right? And then they lose 8 straight games. They lose to Green Bay, lose to Atlanta twice, lose to the Saints twice, lose to the Redskins, the Seahawks, and the Colts. So they finished the season 5-11. So we've been posing this with kind of each team here. Before we break down their offseason moves here, right now, looking at this team, where would you put them in, Mitch? Would you put them in a rebuild, in need of a reload, like a 50-50 team playoff, or Super Bowl contender?
Gosh, it has to be a rebuild. I mean, there's just so many question marks on this team. Coaching wise, players wise. I mean, there's a couple pieces I think are the long term. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is your face of the franchise, and he's going to
We'll get
be
to him.
who you build around. And then there's some other nice young players, but there's a lot of like veteran players who I don't think fit with what you want to do as a franchise. I mean, Russell Okung, as for example, who they got. The dude's getting older and he hasn't been able to stay healthy. Is that who you really want as your franchise left tackle? I mean, Teddy Bridgewater is now getting his first starting chance, first official, because, I mean, he did start some games last year, but he wasn't officially the starter. But
Yeah, since he
anyways,
got hurt at Minnesota.
yeah, but is that the guy you want as your franchise quarterback? And then just some other places. I mean, the defense isn't what we saw when they played in the Super Bowl. So I just think there's so many question marks, and we said it at the beginning of the Panthers segment, they got to figure out what this franchise needs to do first. So it definitely has to be a rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I've seen some people who say, well, Carolina is just in need of a reload. And I disagree. Carolina, to me, they're almost in a more precarious situation than like Arizona was last season. Like, I didn't expect Arizona to do as well as they did. They shocked me. Um, but in a similar manner with Carolina, hiring a coach who has zero NFL experience,
And
who
offensive coordinator.
and an offense coordinator
So the two most important
but
coaching
at least
places.
Joe Brady was on the Saints staff. Like that's where they pulled him from. So at least he has some NFL experience. Matt Rule
Yeah,
has none.
yeah, a
None.
little bit. But yeah, like the two most important like coaching positions in my opinion, the head coach and the offensive coordinator are both college guys who, the head coach has never been in the NFL and Joe Brady has had like a taste of it.
He was in like a dark back room in the Saints facility,
Mm-hmm.
And like yeah, stuff like that happens. Like sometimes you get coaches who get stuck in the back room who end up being great coaches. But I don't know if Joe Brady's offense is going to translate to Carolina. I don't know if Teddy Bridgewater has as strong of an arm as or the weapons around him that Joe Burrow did at LSU. And we'll break it down here. But I agree. This is a team and organization that I think is in need of a rebuild, but I don't know if they think they're in need of a rebuild. This seems like an organization that genuinely believes they could contend for the playoffs next season. And A, with them playing in the NFC South, and B, them playing in the NFC in general, I don't see that happening with them. And we'll break it down their schedule. But to go over to some other stats, last season, Christian McCaffrey, 1,387 in yards, 1,387 yards, 15 touchdowns. He also added 116 catches for 1,005 yards and 4 touchdowns. DJ Moore had about 1,200 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. Curtis Samuel, who was placed on the trade block, had 627 yards, 6 touchdowns. Greg Olsen, who they lost to Seattle, had about 600 yards, 2 touchdowns. Chris Hogan, their big signing from New England, had 8 catches for 67 yards on the entire season. So obviously he was a bust. I guess before we move to their signings, let's really talk about who Carolina lost. Obviously, the biggest name Carolina lost, to me, even bigger than Cam Newton, was Luke Kuechly. Like, Luke Kuechly retiring was like the dagger through the heart of the Super Bowl 50 team that Carolina fielded, And his retirement, to me, was maybe more astonishing than Andrew Luck's.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, Cam was the leader. He was the face. but I think Luke Kuechly was kind of the heart and soul of that team.
Yeah.
I'm on vacation in 2016. I was in Cozumel, and I met some people who were from Carolina, and we were talking like sports, and they were just raving about Luke Kuechly and how much they love this kid and what he does, for that team and the community and all that kind of stuff. And I think it was definitely a big loss. I mean, Luke Kuechly was probably the best middle linebacker, tied with Bobby Wagner in the NFL right now, and I think he's definitely going to be a Hall of Famer. But yeah, that it's definitely a big blow to their defense. That isn't that great as it was with him. So that was. I think that's probably even a bigger loss than Cam Newton.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think a large part, obviously, his health was a huge reason for the retirement. I also think a large part of it was Ron Rivera being let go. You know, um, I think that Ron Rivera played linebacker with Chicago. Like, this was a defensive-minded guy, and to lose that and replace it with an offensive-minded college head coach, I think that it was something that Luke Kuechly didn't want to deal with, and I think the injuries were getting to him. And I think that he just decided that it was his time. And I applaud him for making that decision. Like, I applaud him for understanding when it was time to leave. The same way that Chris Borland did for San Francisco a couple seasons ago.
Yeah, he kind of started the whole trend. Borland like retiring early due to health reasons, and
After
then,
one season.
yeah, and then we've seen that trend. I mean, Andrew Luck and now Luke Kuechly.
Yeah.
And then did Kuechly retire before or after the Matt Rule signing?
I think he retired before, but Matt Rule was a name that was being floated around for Carolina for a really long time.
Okay.
And from what I understand in following some pages and some people who are interiorly there, there was an understanding that they were going to go offensive minded, and that Matt Rule was towards the top of that list. Like, I know they interviewed Mike McCarthy, I know they interviewed a few other people, but it was understanding that they were going to go offensive minded. They wanted to go heavy in defense, like in the draft. This was always part of their plan, but it was an understanding they were going to go offensive minded and kind of leave the defense to do what the defense does. Really kind of similar to what Arizona did with Cliff Kingsbury, and similar to like what Cincinnati did, where Cincinnati last season heading into it, they couldn't find a defensive coordinator. Nobody wanted to be their defensive coordinator. And so Carolina was at an impasse. I think Kuechly made the right decision to step away. But obviously, other big losses. Cam Newton isn't there. We don't know where he's going to go. Greg Olsen isn't there. We don't know where, Greg Olsen is at Seattle now. Did you see his Skype meeting where he was introduced to the team and instead Will Ferrell showed up?
What do you mean? That was Greg Olsen?
Yeah. No, that was the drummer from the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did see it. It was hilarious, as always, from Will Ferrell.
That was pretty good. But, he's not going to be the answer at tight end Seattle needs, but I think he's still got some gas in the tank.
Well, yeah, he's only going to be playing a couple plays, and then he's got to go up to the broadcast booth. He said it in his Skype session, and it looks like he's going to be part of play calling. I mean, he already has a play that Brian Schottenheimer loves, so I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I am too. I think he's a lot smarter. His story is also fantastic. If you guys aren't aware, ESPN has done some stuff on it. If I remember right, one of his sons was born with a heart defect, and he's done a lot of charity work for people affected by childhood illnesses and people who have children who are affected by those illnesses. He's a great all-around person. Round of applause to him. I'm glad that Seattle is as high on him as they are. But those were big losses. So now let's kind of break down some of their big signings. Obviously, the big one was Teddy Bridgewater. There were moments where it looked like Teddy Bridgewater had a contract in place with Chicago. Like, it looked like he was going to the Bears. And then the Panthers swoop right in underneath him and pull him out. And if I remember right, and I'd have to research this, I think Chicago offered him like a 3-year, $54 million deal, and Carolina offered him like a 3-year, $60 million deal. And that was like the difference.
Yeah, I really didn't hear any of the talk of Bridgewater going to the Bears, but
you didn't hear that? It was, oh my God, It was like a done deal. Like, he was, because it was during the tampering period, but before the signing period.
Okay.
So it was where guys were announcing like, oh, I'm going to sign with this team. but it was before they could sign on the dotted line.
Oh yeah, I heard nothing about that.
Yeah, and it was. I swear I was on my lunch break at work, and I was flipping through my Instagram, and every page I'm seeing is Teddy Bridgewater is going to Chicago. Teddy Bridgewater has a contract in place with Chicago. Like it was all but a done deal, and then Carolina swooped right under him and undercut him, and he's in Carolina now. So that was super interesting. Mitch, what do you kind of feel about the Teddy Bridgewater signing out there with the Panthers?
Well, first of all, even though Teddy Bridgewater did play for the Vikings, I've always been kind of a fan of him.
Two
I
glove
think
Teddy.
I think he is a good quarterback, and people, I don't think he deserves some of the hate that he gets.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if he didn't get injured, I think he would still be playing for the Vikings and being their franchise quarterback. It was definitely promising to see what he showed in New Orleans through those 5 or 6 games. I think he showed that I'm back, and I'm really excited to see what he can do in Carolina. I mean, obviously, he's going to be with an offensive minded coaching staff. He's going to have Christian McCaffrey as his running back, and yeah, I'm really excited to see what he's going to do.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting. There's so many question marks with Carolina. We'll break it down here a little bit. I'm glad that Teddy is back. I mean, his knee injury was devastating, and I'm sure that the sports pundits will bash it in everybody's head. But like, if it wasn't for quick reacting by the Vikings doctors, Teddy Bridgewater could have lost his leg. Like when he got hurt, like it was bad, his knee injury. So the fact that this guy's playing football at all, let alone being the starting quarterback for an NFL team, is just a massive round of applause to him and the work ethic that he puts in. Some other signings they had, they signed Pharaoh Cooper to a 1-year deal at wide receiver. They signed Robbie Anderson from the Jets on a 2-year deal for wide receiver. They signed Trey Boston at safety. But really, other than that, no big signings, like no eye-popping signings for Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Teddy Bridgewater is probably the biggest name, but yeah, it was more of like mid-level guys who got signed. I mean, Tahir Whitehead, John Miller,
Yeah.
Pharaoh Cooper, who is more of a special teams ace. Robbie Anderson, he was the guy I wanted the Packers to sign to upgrade our wide receiving core. I definitely think he can step in immediately as their number 2 wide receiver, and depending on how DJ Moore takes that next step forward, he could play the 1 until Moore's ready to take over the wide receiver room. I think he could be a sneaky good signing. But yeah, outside of Bridgewater and Anderson, there's really nothing. And then obviously there's the head scratching move of trading Trey Turner to the Chargers for Russell Okung, which makes no sense because Trey Turner was their best offensive lineman, and you're giving him up for Russell Okung, a guy who's in his mid to early 30s and who didn't even play last year, most of the year, because of what was it, blood clots or a heart condition?
Yeah. Yeah, he's 31. At his peak, Russell Okung is a really good tackle, but I don't know if he's as good as like what Trey Turner was. Like I don't know if his level is what Trey Turner was. I've been saying it for a really long time with Carolina. Every time the draft comes on with Carolina, I'm like, please draft an offensive lineman. Like they need it so desperately. Like when we were breaking down the draft at WIPZ and we got to the Christian McCaffrey pick, and I went, they have to go offensive line. Like I understand Christian McCaffrey is there, but you have to go offensive line. And they drafted McCaffrey, and that's fine. It's worked out for him. But the running theme for Carolina for the last 5 seasons has been that they don't have an offensive line. And that's what broke Cam Newton. And that is what I think might break Teddy Bridgewater, is that they have no offensive line. And they've shown no want to go get an offensive line.
Yeah, it definitely reminds me of 2 things. First, NFL-wise, it's like the Seattle approach. It's like it doesn't matter how good our offensive linemen are. If we keep them together and get that consistency, they're going to be good somehow. And then I also compare it to how I feel when I see the Orlando Magic draft and they only draft big guys. And it's like, when are you going to get a backcourt player?
Yeah.
You'd need a guard.
Yeah, it's like you can draft Mo Bamba all you want, but there's really good guards, and whether it's point or shooting that can help you.
Yeah.
And it's almost like Carolina's thought process is, if we can just run quick slants and screen plays the whole game, we don't really need an offensive line, you know? And that's it's like even the offensive linemen who are available this year, like Brian Balaga, right? Brian Balaga didn't have any like Carolina never reached out to Balaga, right? Like so many of these offensive linemen who were available, whether it was like John Glasgow from Detroit, whether it was, all these guys who were available, Carolina never really reached out to any of them. So there was a thought process. Like I remember watching or going through mock drafts, and it was, well, Carolina's probably going to take an offensive tackle in the first round. And they were sitting there at number 7, and they didn't. And like Jarek Wills was there, like there were offensive linemen there, and they didn't do any of it. Like, let's break down their draft, because if we keep talking about their offseason, I'm going to blow a gasket because I don't understand what their thought process is here. I really don't. So let's break down their NFL draft. Carolina, if I remember right, is the first team in NFL history to draft only defensive players throughout the entire draft. They had 7 total picks in the draft, 1 first round, 2 second rounders, no third, and then a 4th, 5th, and 6th. All in all, I thought they drafted really well. I thought that with each of their picks, there's so many bonuses to them. My issue is that they didn't address any of their real needs, So let's break down the draft. First off, round 1, pick number 7, defensive lineman Derek Brown from Auburn. I think this guy has high reward, but I also have really high risk. Like, he reminds me of the Star Lotulelei draft that Carolina picked him at. Like, I don't know if he's going to live up to the expectation that people are expecting him to live up to in the interior of that defensive line.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of hype around Derek Brown. He's a dominant run defender and stuff, but the questions come to how is he in the pass rush game? And I think that really takes away from what he can achieve as a player if he doesn't develop in that area. And that's why some draft pundits were saying that Javon Kinlaw out of South Carolina probably would have been the better pick, just because Kinlaw offers a little bit more in the pass rushing department. But I know that Derek Brown, for us, we weren't really high on him during the process. And I know, let's see, is he going to be Star Latua or is he going to be Kawan Short?
Yeah.
It's going to be really interesting to see how they develop him.
It is. It's all going to be development, but we also have to remember that those guys who developed defensive players, they're not there in Carolina anymore.
Exactly.
And that's the issue, is that, like, I understand them drafting all defense because their needs, with the exception of offensive line and tight end, were primarily on defense. But I don't know if the support system is there for those guys. So it's going to be interesting to see Derek Brown and how he plays. Their second-round pick, 38th overall, defensive end out of Penn State, Yetur Gross-Matos. I love the pick. Yetur Gross-Matos was such a wrecking force at Penn State. He was so good. He had some really fantastic games. He was another guy, the same with like AJ Epinesa, who we talked about, who looked like he could be a late first-round pick, who ended up sliding into the second. And I think he was an absolute steal for Carolina at defensive end. I love the kid, and hopefully his game can translate to the NFL.
Yeah, I think the person who loved the pick the most was probably Brian Burns. If he's their primary edge rusher, and now he gets a guy like Yetur Gross-Matos on the other side of him, where, the other side of the pass rush has mainly been Mario Addison and nothing else. So he's going to love that he gets a guy, to help him in the pass rushing department for, years to come. And, hopefully they can rub off on each other and they turn into a nice little pass rushing duo.
Yeah, I mean, he has he just has such upside, that I'm so interested to see how he works out. Carolina then moved up into the second round to draft Jeremy Chin, safety out of Southern Illinois. Really interesting guy. He fell to the final pick in the second round. This was a guy who, again, some people had him, depending on what teams were going to take, some people had him as like the 3rd overall safety. And with a safety-heavy need for teams, he could have gone in the first round. But I think playing at Southern Illinois really hurt him, not having that level of competition. And so he ended up falling to Carolina in the second round, the late second. I love the pick. I think the kid has, if you've watched his game tape at all, you get the chance to. Obviously, Southern Illinois football games aren't primetime TV, but if you get the chance to watch it against a lesser competition, he's dominant. He's really good. He has great intelligence. He's got all of everything you want to see. I think his big knock was just that he played at Southern Illinois as opposed to, LSU.
Yeah, some of these smaller school safeties were talked about as possibly being first round picks, and obviously they fell. And Jeremy Chin is a really interesting guy to see. I think that he could fill kind of the Luke Kuechly role / Isaiah Simmons role that I envisioned them taking, because I thought that Isaiah Simmons should have been the pick for the Panthers, and you just put him in the middle and he replaces Luke Kuechly. But I think Jeremy Chin could fill that role that Isaiah Simmons could have filled if they decided to draft him there, because I think he definitely is versatile to play safety and inside backer, and I think that's kind of the trend these days of what the inside linebacker position is going to be turning into.
Yeah.
A guy who can play in the middle of the defense, but also play in the backfield. So I think he could definitely give this defense a boost.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And, you got to remember that we're talking about the NFC South here. So at safety, and when we get to some of their other defensive back picks here in a second, you're talking about having to cover Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Mike Thomas and Alvin Kamara and like Rob Gronkowski now. So you need a guy who's athletic, who can do it all. And I think that Jeremy Chin has the ability to do that with the proper amount of, coaching and infrastructure that we've already gone over. We don't know if it's there right now. So to round out their draft, in the fourth round, they took Torrey Pride Jr., corner out of Notre Dame. I've watched this guy for a long time, loved what he brought to the table. I had him as kind of a early to mid third round pick. He ended up sliding to late in the fourth. I love it. I think he's a great pick. Then they went in the fifth round, they went Kenny Robinson Jr., safety out of West Virginia. In the sixth round, they went Bravion Roy, defensive lineman out of Baylor. And in the seventh round, they went corner Stanley Thomas Oliver III out of FIU. Anybody interesting in those picks that I just rattled off for you, Mitch?
Yeah, it's got to be Kenny Robinson. I mean, the guy, I think he has a step over all the rookies that were drafted in his class for the Panthers and the overall class. I mean, the guy spent a year in the XFL, so he knows how to be a professional. He's got the experience, even though the season was cut short. And I definitely think he could be the dark horse for this draft class for the Panthers.
Yeah, getting that opportunity to play in the XFL. And speaking of the XFL, the other signing the Panthers had was P.J. Walker, quarterback of the Houston Roughnecks, who lit up the league. Probably would have been their MVP. What role he's going to play, we don't really know. But yeah, I mean, him having that opportunity to play professionally against, for the most part, guys who had some form of NFL experience, it was huge. The fact that he got to line up against some of these guys who really did play in NFL games and had meaningful snaps is a huge bonus to him. And I think that that Carolina getting him could really turn into a steal. I think he already brings a little bit of a veteran presence to a rookie, player.
Yeah, definitely, and that is going to be valuable in an offseason that's been, changed due to COVID. It's definitely going to be, hopefully he can bring along the other rookies and share, his guidance and wisdom from what he learned as being a pro in the XFL. And, you definitely hit it right that, Kenny Robinson got to play against players who were good enough to be the NFL instead
Even
of
for a little while.
Yeah, even for a little while. And then instead of, playing against, guys in college who, 75% of them aren't even going to sniff the NFL. So, yeah, I'm going to keep my eye on Kenny Robinson.
Yeah, and on top of that, his other benefit is that he played at West Virginia. Now, obviously, West Virginia isn't known for their defense, but when you have to play the Oklahomas and the Texas Techs and the TCUs and the Baylors of the college world, you play really good NFL level competition that we've seen. You know, we can rattle off wide receivers from those schools. I mean, CeeDee Lamb, right, was taken in the first round. You had Denzel Mims from Baylor, who was taken, I think, in the second round of this last draft, or early third, I don't remember. TCU, Jalen Rager, right? And these were guys that he would have played against. Maybe not to the level that they were first round picks, but he would have played against. And so he has that advantage. He knows how to play these guys. Maybe he doesn't, obviously, like I said, West Virginia wasn't known for their defense. They would have teams hang up 50 on him regularly. But he still has that experience there, and that's what's crucial. So I think Carolina's draft is so difficult for me to put a grade on because on one hand, I want to give them an A because I think all of their players have the opportunity to be out of the park home runs. But I also look at what they need on as a team and I go, what the fuck are you doing? Like what are you doing? And mind my French there, but it's literally like it's like I was playing Madden today and I had the first overall pick because I signed with the Dolphins as the coach. And I traded to Carolina, and Carolina drafts like a 64 overall defensive tackle with the first overall pick. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And that's what it just seems like Carolina's doing right now. And it blows my mind. Blows my mind. But we've already had a really long show, so let's break down the Panthers schedule. Now, we have talked about the Panthers already 3 times this season. We talked about them when they played Arizona. We talked about them the 2 times they played Atlanta. Now, I had them losing to Arizona and going 1-1 against Atlanta. Mitch, what did you have them against the Cardinals and the Falcons?
I had them losing to both teams.
You had them losing to Atlanta twice?
Yeah, losing to Atlanta twice and losing to the Cardinals.
Okay, perfect. So we'll skip those games, but to break down the rest of their schedule, they go week 1, the home game against the Las Vegas Raiders. One of the only teams I think who has more question marks around their season than the Panthers is the Raiders. I give this one to the Panthers. I think they stack up well against what the Raiders have to offer.
Yeah, week 1 against the Las Vegas Raiders. I think they're going to beat them due to the fact that, the Raiders are facing a guy who's never coached the NFL and, an offensive coordinator who's, only had a sip of coffee there. So he's definitely going to have the edge, and especially with Matt Rule not getting the offseason that he needs to implement a new system with new faces. I don't think they're going to be coming strong out of the gate, so the Raiders will definitely win.
Okay, so we go back and forth. I actually gave that game to Carolina. I thought Carolina would pop the Raiders in the mouth a little bit. So you have it as a loss. Week 2, they play at Tampa Bay. I think that's enough said right there. They play at Tampa Bay. That's a loss for the Panthers.
Yeah, Tampa Bay just outmatches them, so loss.
All right, and then they go week 3. They go to Los Angeles to play the Chargers. I have them winning that game. I think they're going to start out 2-1, and it's only because the AFC West, the bottom half of it, is so bad.
I have the Chargers beating the Panthers. I like how they match up offensively and defensively, and even though there's that question mark of quarterback of who's going to be it, either it's Tyrod Taylor or Justin Herbert, I still think that both of them have enough of an ability to beat a team like Carolina.
Interesting. So then week 4, they play Arizona. We have them losing that game. Both of us do. And week 5, they go to Atlanta. We have them losing that game. So, Mitch, you have them starting the season out 0-5.
Yeah, I'm not too high on the Carolina Panthers season. I think once you get through the whole record, you're going to be shocked of what they end up with.
Interesting. Okay. So because last week I think was our greatest difference with Buffalo. So we'll be interested to see. Week 6, they play the Chicago Bears. I hate it anytime that I give the Bears a win, but I think the Bears stack up well enough against the Panthers to beat the Panthers. I think defensively, we already talked about how bad Carolina's offense is going to be. I think the Bears wreak havoc on it. Teddy Bridgewater gets dropped a lot worse than he did when he played the Bears with the Saints. And I have the Bears winning that game over the Panthers.
Yep, I have the Bears winning. Khalil Mack is basically going to walk and skip to Teddy Bridgewater and then demolish him into the ground. And I think by this point in the season, Nick Foles, if he wasn't already the starter, is going to be starting. And I think, he's going to give him the best chance to beat the Panthers.
Yeah, that's. We'll break down Chicago. We actually have the Bears next week, so it's going to be interesting. Week 7, they go to New Orleans to play the Saints. Teddy Bridgewater playing his old team. An interesting matchup, just for the sake of it, but I don't have the Panthers winning that. Just way too many questions on the Panthers in general. Defensively, how are they going to stack up against a loaded Saints offense? Bridgewater obviously knows quite a bit about the playbook. He's going to bring that in, but I don't know. I think New Orleans is too much for him.
Yeah, I have Carolina losing this one. To quote Hamilton, the Carolina Panthers against the Saints are outgunned, outmanned, and outplanned.
There you go. I hate that you quoted Hamilton on this show. We're not going to post this now. We're just going to cancel this episode. We're going to pretend it didn't happen. So week 8, then they play the Falcons again. This I have them winning. I think they're going to win at least one NFC South game. I had to figure out who it was. Was it more likely that they beat the Buccaneers or the Saints? No, but I think they split the series with the Falcons, so I have them winning that game. Mitch, you have them losing that game.
Yeah, I have them losing this game. I originally had them winning, but due to some continuity errors and my whole hierarchy of how the season's going to go, I had to change it to an L. So there's a possibility they could take one against the Falcons, but in my scenario, they don't.
Interesting. So at the halfway point of the season, I have the Panthers sitting at 3-5. Mitch has them at 0-8. So we'll see if Mitch has them doing any better in the back half. Obviously, they can't do much worse. Moving on to week 9, it does not get any easier for the Panthers. They go to Kansas City to play the Chiefs. And like I said with New Orleans, I think that's enough said. I think Pat Mahomes tears this team apart, and I think Carolina walks out beaten and bloodied.
Yep, Chiefs are going to drop 60 on them like Michael Jordan.
They very well might. Week 10, they play Tampa for the second time. This was one I went back and forth on because I feel like with how competitive the NFC South is, this is always, there's always a chance this could be a drop. I feel like this could be a game Tampa, could be a trap game for them. But I couldn't pick against Tampa, so I have them winning that game.
Yep, I have Carolina losing against the Bucs again. I think Tom Brady's going to escort them outside of the stadium, and they're just going to take the loss without even playing.
Yeah, they very well might. Pretend one of their players has COVID so they don't actually have to play. Week 11 matchup against the Detroit Lions. This is a game that I actually have Carolina winning. I think that with the inconsistencies of the Lions this season, defensively the Lions are a lot better. Offensively, they're not at all. One of the only teams that I think may have a worse offensive line than Carolina is Detroit, even with some of the signings they had. I have Carolina winning that. I think McCaffrey stacks up well against them. I think offensively the weapons are there. I think that's a game that I have Carolina winning.
Yeah, I think Carolina's going to get their first win right here. I'm not really confident in Matt Patricia as a head coach after what he's shown us so far and some of the off the field stuff he's kind of done as a head coach. Getting rid of Darius Slay, but
and Quadre Diggs.
Yep, exactly. But I think with the Carolina Panthers not winning a game up to this point, and with them playing enough games to where they can gel, I think they can squeak out a win against Detroit.
Okay, interesting. So you have them finally winning their first one. Week 12, they go to Minnesota to play the Vikings. This is a game where just defensively the Vikings stack up really well against the Panthers. Offensively, I think the Vikings and their run game is going to wreak havoc on the Panthers. I have the Panthers losing that game to the Vikings.
Yep, I have the Vikings beating the Carolina Panthers. I think you're going to hear that damn horn all game.
Yeah, I agree. Week 13, they finally get a bye, so they get a little bit of a rest. Heading into the bye at that point, Mitch, you have them sitting at 1-11, and I have them at 3-8 at that point. Sorry, 4-8 at that point. So obviously very different. They come out of the bye. They play Denver. Denver is a team that I'm so high on, and I can't wait for us to get to the Broncos because I think they're a really good team to me. Every time they've come up so far, I've said Denver's going to win. That's not the case. I don't have them going 16-0. But I have Denver winning this game against Carolina. I think that if the Denver offense can gel the way that I hope it is gelled by week 14 of the season, Drew Lock took huge steps towards the end of the season. I have Denver winning that game against the Panthers in the rematch of Super Bowl 50.
Yep, I have Denver beating the Carolina Panthers yet again. I this for the exact same point. I think that by this time in the season that the Denver Broncos are going to be the team that me and you think that they have the potential to be, and I think they're going to realize their potential by this point, and it's going to be an easy win over Carolina.
Yeah, definitely. Week 15, they play the Packers at Green Bay. Last season, this was a great matchup. Playing in the snow, it came down to a goal line stand. It was so good, so interesting to watch. But the difference was that last season, Greg Olsen was there. Last season, Luke Kuechly was there. Last season, Carolina was a lot better. I don't think that's the case this season, and I have them losing to the Packers in Green Bay.
Yeah, I have the Packers beating Carolina yet again. I mean, I think on paper this looks like the Christian McCaffrey versus Aaron Jones show. And, McCaffrey has the worst offensive line, so I don't think he's going to be able to do what he wants to do, especially against our defense. So I think, Aaron Jones is going to lead the charge against the Panthers, and we're going to come out with the win.
Yeah, and he had a great game against them, last season. Week 16, they played the Redskins at Washington. Last season, they lost to the Redskins. I don't think they suffer that fate this season. I haven't seen enough from Washington to think I haven't seen enough for them in terms of improvement. Obviously, I think Dwayne Haskins is going to take a couple of steps, but the running back position still has a huge question mark. The tight end position still has a huge question mark. Massive question marks on the offensive line now that Trent Williams is gone. Massive question marks on the defensive side of the ball. I actually have Carolina winning that game against Washington.
Yep, I have Carolina beating the Washington Redskins. Their whole offense, I think, is a question mark. I think I've said it before, and I'll say it many times. I think the Redskins have an underrated defense, and if they can gel together, I think they can definitely be a top 15 defense. But without an offense, they're not going to go very far, so I think Carolina will beat them.
Fair enough. So then week 17, home game against the Saints. This was another one kind of on pace with Tampa a little bit earlier where I thought maybe, at this point, it could be that the Saints have already clinched the playoffs and that they're not playing their starters. So this might be a game that the Panthers can end up winning. With starters, assuming that they're being played, I don't see New Orleans losing this game. So I have the Panthers finishing the season on a loss.
Yep, I have them losing on a loss as well. Even if, the Saints decide the rest of their starters, I mean, you're either going to be facing Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill. So I definitely think both of them are capable of beating the Panthers.
Sure. No, that's fair enough. So then to finish the season out, I have the Panthers going 5-11. Mitch, you have them going 2-14 on the season. So my question to you there is just a little sneak peek. Does that guarantee them the first overall pick in the draft?
Let me take a look. I think it might, but there also might be a worse team. Oh yeah, there's a worse team.
There's a worse team.
Yep, I have a team not winning a single game.
Oh, Mitch, come on. Come on. Is it Miami?
You're in the right state.
Oh, okay. All right. It's
so
Tampa.
the Panthers would have the third overall pick in my projected season.
Okay, so if
fourth.
you have what? Okay.
Yeah, they're gonna have a top 5 pick.
Hold on. So you're gonna tell me that a 2-14 team is gonna have the 4th overall pick?
Yeah, I have a team not winning a game, and then I have 2 teams only winning 1 game.
Who are the 2 teams only winning 1 game? Spoiler alert here, but whatever. Who are the 2 teams you have only winning 1 game? Because Jacksonville, you have not winning any. Fine, well, we can break that down. But
yeah, Jacksonville is not going to win any. I have the Giants only winning 1 game, and then I have the Jets, and I have the Giants and Jets winning 1 game. I'm not high on the New York teams.
All right. Okay. All right. When we get to those teams, I might agree with you on Jacksonville. I don't think any team is ever going to go 0-16 in the NFL again. The same way that I don't think any team is ever going to go 16-0 again. But all right, we'll fight on that. We'll fight on that because we obviously have varying degrees of belief in those franchises, those organizations. But Wow. Okay. So that means that if you're a Panthers fan, or you're a Giants fan, or a Jets fan, or a Jaguars fan, send us an email. Tell us how stupid Mitch is for thinking that your team is going to do as bad as they are. Um, but yeah, you can send us an email, fourthstringsp@gmail.com. That's FOURTH string sp@gmail.com. I obviously keep the hate mail to a minimum, but if you have some choice words, I'll make sure they're really relayed over to Mitch. Um, but yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Send us an email with any questions, any comments. Next week we have Chicago, right, Mitch?
Yep, we have the Bears.
The Bears. All right. And remember, we are Packer fans, so we're not going to make them go to the Super Bowl, but hopefully we'll at least seem semi-partial. We'll break down the Bears draft, which is really interesting to me because just a little sneak peek. If you look at it, some people have Chicago as like the best draft in the NFC North. Some people have them as the worst draft in the NFC North. So it's interesting to see. Their offseason was definitely interesting. A lot of question marks walking in. We're going to record that episode here on Saturday, so hopefully we'll get that to you in the next couple of days. Go back, listen to all the episodes we've done so far. We'll have some more updates in terms of like NBA, college football, NFL, MLB, that kind of stuff as we go. But we're going to continue with the train here with the NFL season. Mitch, you got any last thoughts before we sign off?
Yep, I got two. First, I want to go on a little tangent about Cam Newton.
Okay.
I know a lot of people have been saying, like, why hasn't Cam Newton been signed? And I've even seen, like, segments today from other shows saying, like, is Cam Newton's career over and stuff like that. And I think that everybody just needs to chill out, calm down. The reason that he hasn't been signed is he hasn't been healthy the past 2 seasons. And with COVID-19 going on, teams haven't had the chance to see his medicals and get a physical. So that's the reason why he's not going to, sign with the team. He's either going to sign as a backup and to a team where he could like overtake next year, maybe like Indy, like go to Indy and then beat out Rivers since he's on a 1-year contract as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or, he sits out, gets healthier, then he signs with a team that needs a quarterback. So everyone just needs to chill out. This isn't a Colin Kaepernick situation. This is all about health. So just chill. And then two, to all the haters, Jets, show me a Super Bowl ring instead of Super Bowl III. Giants, your team decided to keep Eli Manning at quarterback for so many years, and I think you can all agree with me that he should have been put out the pasture a couple of years ago. And then Jacksonville, I think you know your situation. I mean, shoot, you're considering getting rid of your starting running back because he wants Cam Newton to play with you. Think about it. He wants Cam Newton to be on your team, and the next day he's on the trade block.
Yeah, but Cam Newton is no Gardner Minshew.
That's the state of your franchise. So that's what I say to the haters.
We'll go back and forth on it. I would just like to point out that I was the Giants head coach the other day on Madden, and Eli Manning took me and the Giants to a 12-4 record. So I don't know if he's as bad as you think he is. I had him throwing, I think it was like 32 touchdowns, like 11 interceptions, something like that. So I don't know, man. I mean, we were pretty good. But we'll break it down. I have a lot more faith in Dave Gettleman and the Giants than you do. I have maybe only slightly more faith in the Jets than you do. I don't think Adam Gase is the answer at all, and I think this is going to be his last season. But we'll definitely see. Jacksonville is an enigma, and we'll break it down. But I think Jacksonville has some pieces there, so we'll break it all down. Yeah, we got those episodes are all coming up. Unfortunately, those guys are a little bit way down the list. Jets, Jaguar, yeah, they're way down the list. Down the list here, but we have Chicago up next. Bears fans, let us know. Send the hate to us. We'll definitely read it online. Tell us how you're going to sweep the NFC North next year and break Aaron Rodgers' other collarbone. Let us know. But yeah, thank you so much, you guys, for listening. We appreciate it. We'll get the other episodes uploaded and out to you as soon as we can. Everybody, please stay safe. Please stay healthy. States are starting to reopen, but just be smart. Otherwise, everybody have yourself a fantastic night. Mitch, any closing thoughts?
No, not really. Just, everyone be safe, healthy, be smart, and, hopefully we get some, exciting sports news within, the next couple days and weeks, and hopefully we'll actually get to see some real live sports outside of what we already have right now.
Yeah. I can only watch the Korean Baseball League and the Bundesliga for so long. So hopefully we get some real sports, some real American sports back here. But yeah, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned for the next couple episodes. Everybody have yourself a fantastic night.